Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. This is the Rules Committee meeting. March 19, 2025. We're on the record from 1:40 to 3:40. We're on the calendar from 1:40 to 3:40. We're starting at 1:47. I'd like to start with introductions. Mr. Martinez.
George Martinez.
Mark Littlefield.
Zach Johnson.
Christopher Constant.
Anna Brawley.
We also have Legislative Services, Assembly Council. We have the clerk. We have the audience over here. So I'm going to dive us right into the matter. So I'm giving myself a word today. If you look at the agenda, it says Legislative Branch Service Awards, Christopher Constant, but that's not what's really happening. We're here to celebrate Claire Ross for 15 years of service with the municipality.
Do you want me to take it? Oh, thank you.
Congratulations. 15 years is quite a while.
I'm trying to keep up with Mark.
You'll need grandchildren. Okay, so we don't have a packed agenda today, but we will get into the business and just dive right through it. Generally speaking, this is an opportunity for the chair and invite the mayor to come make a report, but I don't really have a broad or deep report other than elections coming, lots of conversations about what comes with the new assembly. We will get into those conversations after the election. Otherwise, I would note we have, as I have mentioned, a special meeting on the 2nd to address the school district budget. And there is a possibility that we will have a special meeting or a continued meeting after the meeting of the 8th, depending on the nature of the business that gets done. Other than that, I'll just hand off if we want to start with Legislative Services.
Thank you. Allie has been really busy putting together the Coordinated Response to Homelessness Summit tomorrow and Friday. So we really hope to see members there. It's been a team effort, a lot of people working on it, but Allie has really done a lot of good work. So thanks, Allie, once again for doing another good event. Luckily, she likes events and is good at it. Jennifer's been working on a really cool story to celebrate ARPA success stories. I can't remember if we've reported back to you on this or not, but when you did that, I think when Chris and George did the one at the Mountain View Fieldhouse last month and we got some good press over it, we decided to try to do one for each district. So the next one's coming up is Little Bears Daycare in Girdwood. We wanted to get that one done so Randy could get in a photo op for that. And then we have ones coming up throughout the city to make sure that we got something in each of your districts that we could celebrate and just have something fun to get excited about and share with the community. We've been tracking the legislature, the election bills are moving. And so I've been working with Jamie in the clerk's office to make sure that Anchorage's priorities get adopted to any election bills that pass the state. And then we've had sometimes when you pass, all the time, when you pass resolutions to go to the state, Jennifer forwards them to the state legislators, and then specifically if there's a committee that a bill is in front of. And so she's been doing quite a bit of that this month. And I just remembered to send you one that we worked with the Anchorage delegation to send a letter to the Alaska delegation. And I think that's the first time they've done a joint letter like that, at least in a long time. So that was really cool that they got together and helped support one of our issues. And then we've been busy scheduling new member orientation, which is going to be happening on the 23rd and 24th. And there's a lot of moving pieces to get ready for that. So the Legislative Services and Clerk's Office has been working to put that together, and hopefully we have a really good orientation for the new members coming up. And that is it for us.
Clerk.
Thanks. As was announced yesterday, the election team put together a data hub on the elections webpage, which is a map that shows ballot returns per precinct. And so that was an idea that Deputy Election Administrator Liz Edwards had, and she worked with the GIS team to bring that to fruition. And so it just got launched, and we're really excited about that. And we already have ideas, thanks to Chair Constant, for ways to make it more fun. And also, there's been a lot of talk about the volcano, and I just wanted to assure everyone here that I've been in touch with IT and legal and OEM and the clerk of court and all of the things, and reviewing what I am already able to do under an emergency plan in the code and drafting, getting stuff on paper so that I'm not in the moment trying to figure out all of it. So hopefully this is neutralizing the universe for what could happen. I think that's all I have to report on today.
So I would add to that discussion about potential emergency around the volcano. If the worst of all possible timings were to happen around the day the election is closing, or maybe the day before, and things became very chaotic, there might be the cause for a special meeting to take certain actions relating to the election, but we don't know what that might be until we get there. If we get there, and as Jamie mentioned, all this work is hopefully prophylactic to the universe, so we'll just say, nah, you're prepared, we'll do it on another day. So just know that there might be an emergency call if such call is needed. And the charter provides some very specific actions for the assembly in the context of an emergency if one should arise. Don't anticipate it, but we are prepared for it. So I would add also one thing to my report. On the 18th of April, we're working to schedule a tour of the downtown municipal functions for our youth members. And we're kind of working to create a bit more of a mentorship next year for the new members that will come on, so that they get an early and advanced tour, get to meet the department heads, and get to go to all the downtown functions, at least in this first go round of the municipal offices. So come to City Hall, meet with the mayor's team, meet with the 8th floor admin, maybe go through some of the departments, head over for a tour of police and fire and the health department, so they can kind of see the city government in action. And so that will be something we're planning and maybe happening before the next rules committee. So, and then next on the list, we have Assembly Council's office. Anything to report?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a brief report. Our team keeps working hard to try and deliver legislation that the members have been asking for. And in thinking the last couple of meetings, I said I'd try to deliver some numbers so we can sort of put something concrete to what we do. And right now I have a year-to-date report for our deliverables. So for ordinances so far in 2025, including last night, we've got 19 ordinances that we've drafted for the members. We've got 5 resolutions that we've drafted year to date. And then floor amendments, including last night's, we've had 35 so far. And we've had 4 laid on the table items that were new laid on the table items, 6 supplemental laid on the table items. And so that's our guest productivity year to date for 2025. I also have some Board of Adjustment info. There's currently 2 cases. We just completed one, the Board of Adjustment completed in January 2025, the Canyon Road Estates case that's up on the whose side. And then there's another Mill subdivision case. And I really want to thank the mayor and the assembly for confirming a 5th Board of Adjustment member. We really needed them to proceed this Mill subdivision case, Janet Mueller. So as you know, requires a panel of 3 to decide each case out of the 5 board members. And we had 2 that were conflicted and a vacant seat. So we really needed that 5th seat filled. So thank you for that. That can proceed. So that's, I think, all that I have.
So I would note also, because of the federal uncertainty and the kind of the chaos that's happening at that level, error in our favor, if you will, we are now in receipt of a number of potential new members of the legal team. We've had a job advertisement out, and we're going to be interviewing some folks, or at least one person in the near term. And there have been on the 8th or 7th floor, at least 5 or 6 applicants who have come to us from Federal Legal Service due to the uncertainty. And so stay tuned for more on that conversation. So, okay, Ombudsman.
Good afternoon. For the record, Heather McAlpine, Associate Ombudsman. Ombudsman Hess invited me to speak to you briefly. Generally regarding the youth reps, before I do that, I did want to let the body know that we will be attending the homelessness summit. I'm not sure the proper name, but we'll be attending that tomorrow to try to get some more information just for our office and hopefully to share with the community, as we do have a lot of contact with the community being located physically where we are on the first floor. As far as the youth rep group, it is winding down their term. We have 2 out of our 3 members. We have 2 graduating in May. Mika Bell's graduating from South and Kennedy Grady is graduating from Bartlett, showing a nice depth of our span of our community, which is very nice. The group has done an amazing job, I think, this year of being more interactive with each other. They've established a little chat message group. They talk about, their responsibilities and what they have going on. We meet monthly for mentoring and conversation. We meet at Pilates in the evening because these are high achieving youth. They have very busy schedules. But it was very nice for them just to have the opportunity to meet together, talk together, and have that peer group communication. We've had several assembly members join those meetings, which has allowed the reps to establish more personal relationships with the assembly and just hear from them, ask questions. And a lot of our assembly members have been really great to come and kind of share their personal why they are assembly members and share some of their goals. We will be meeting tomorrow again. Member Johnson, I believe, is gonna come meet with us briefly for a while. And then we have actually our former youth member, Jesse Terrell, is going to join the meeting, which will be kind of neat for them to have that interaction. He's going to share some of what he was working on because they have expressed interest in kind of taking up some of his thoughts. So I think that's going to be kind of a neat opportunity as well. We will also be discussing recruiting for the fall. We're hopeful to have another robust application process. Some of you know I've been involved with this for 2 years now. In the first year we had 3, and last term we had 14 applicants. It was really neat to see that, and it was a very wide span of the whole municipality. Hopefully we will have another very robust group applying. My hope is that discussions about this position will become commonplace at all of our local high schools through their civics programs, through their teachers, government classes, student government, and that sort of thing. It's so encouraging to see the growth both of the program and of the youth themselves. Finally, Chris kind of told you about the tour day that's coming up. It's very exciting. I think it's such a cool opportunity for the youth to see the other side of government, and also current climate. It's really important that they will have the opportunity to see both sides of the government working together. So Chris has been working with the administration to make this happen, and I think that is it's really awesome. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone here for the support of the Youth Rep program and the youth of the community. I think we had a great group, and I'm looking forward to working with them again. And finally, we will be having another mentoring session in April. We will discuss that at our meeting tomorrow, what that exact date is, but just so everybody knows, you still have an opportunity to come and meet with the youth and share your experiences. And that's about it.
Thank you. All right, go ahead, Claire.
Heather has done such an amazing job with that program. It would really not exist without her. Our
Come on,
office
Heather.
just
Heather.
Our office did not have the capacity to work on it, so Heather took it over, and it's just been wonderful. It's neat to see it grow. And
Karen.
I brought this up to Chris, but we really couldn't figure out how or if it would work. But after one of the meetings, I had a bunch of South students come and ask me, like, what happened here? Why, if you didn't like it, did you say move to approve? They had a lot of specific questions. about how the meeting worked. And I thought it might be an excellent opportunity for our student reps in the future, if we have students at the meeting, that they could spend a little time talking to them about. It seems like a neat role for them to be the leaders and telling them what's happening with the meeting. Just a thought.
I'll just respond to that really quickly because I think that is a great idea. And I do think that that is part of what they do. They are very, well, at least the current group, and hopefully, again, we're still working on this program, but that they do understand that that's part of their role, is to reach out to their peers and to be that person. I know that this current group is very interested in doing that. That's one of the reasons we'll be discussing recruitment at our next meeting, because I hope to have them fully engaged in that process.
Okay, Miss Farley or Anna?
Yeah, that actually reminded me, I remember when those of us who started in 2023, there was an assembly navigator position, and I think it was another essentially young person, and their job was more kind of what Karen's describing, I think, like in the meeting, because I know it's hard with the youth reps. If it's in the meeting, they have to be the meeting person, right? But that, I just wondered if there's a status on that or how it was working, because I know that also takes effort to set up, but it seems like it has potential.
Yeah, we just didn't have capacity. We ran it once and we tried our hardest, but didn't give it a lot. And luckily we found a wonderful person who is now working in the state legislature. I ran into when we were down in Juneau. Yeah, it'd be a great program to expand if we ever had more capacity.
And I'll just offer that we've been focusing very much on the youth member program. And so at some point, someone may pick that back up. But at this time, I definitely want to make sure we get this youth thing really crystallized. And thank you for all of your support. And I want to double, triple down on her pitch. There's one more opportunity to join them for coffee at Kaladi in April before they term out and go on to other things. And so if you haven't had a chance, it's in East Anchorage for the East Anchorage folks. It's Karen's favorite turn on the road that needs a new path for pedestrians. And I highly recommend going and spending some time. They are very bright and active young people, and they would welcome to hear from you. Well, I think their last meetings are going to be the 2 meetings in April, and we have invited all 3 of them to participate in the meetings in April because of the significance of those meetings with the kind of election and the certification and the transition and all of that. And so I think that it ends for them in April. It might be the first meeting in May, but I think it's April. So go ahead.
Just saying, I was saying to Claire, but I didn't wanted to say it to the group because they are 2 graduating in May. I think those last 2 weeks of May are going to be pretty rough for them. So yeah, we probably will end in April.
Yeah. And so, and I think that part of the business is pretty much taken care of. It'll kind of cap after that April 18th and the April 22nd meeting. So in fact, we might want to draft a resolution for them for that April 22nd meeting with an actual formal resolution naming them and, you know, celebrating. Yeah. Yeah, we did it for Mr. Terrell. Well, yeah, I mean, I hope they've signed up for it. It's all approved. They should maybe talk with Matt Farina on that. Yeah, thank you. All right, anything else on that topic? Nope. All right. So then there is no current unfinished business. We have new business on the list. We're going to take an opportunity to hear from Mr. Martinez about his adventures to the National Association of Counties Conference in DC. George, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Hey, everybody. So I've recently had the chance to visit the National Association of Counties annual legislative conference in Washington, D.C. And just to note, the municipality of Anchorage has been a member of the National Association of Counties for quite some time. And for clarification for folks who are in the public who are listening, you'll hear 2 presentations today. Other members have went to the National League of Cities, and I went to the National Association of Counties. Cities and counties, just for clarity, for my high level, just keeping it short and sweet, essentially, we're a unified government. A unified government means we both are a municipality and a county. And so this Association of Counties really dealt with folks who are county supervisors more than municipal folks. And so from that vantage point, I'll go through a couple of elements from the executive summary. There's a handout available for members, a couple of the areas of the key takeaways, and then open it up for any just comments from members. Essentially, the conference was provided timely insights to technology, modernization, disaster preparedness, economic development, tribal relations, rural infrastructure, housing policy, and public safety. While federal programs remain a key resource, many county leaders expressed concerns about shifting federal priorities, evolving executive orders, and the unpredictability of long-term federal support. One central area was disaster preparedness and emergency response, particularly in preemptive housing policy. Rather than addressing housing shortages based on current and projected needs, the idea would be that Anchorage must adopt a disaster response lens, recognizing housing instability as a key vulnerability in any emergency scenario. So I'll just highlight that this report identifies some key takeaways and some strategies through the lens of Anchorage, although they are framed directly from what I got from the conference itself. So they may not be necessarily applicable to our community, but these are some of the ideas that were discussed through our lens. In the area of technology and innovation, folks, and you'll see every category, federal insecurity and evolving executive orders are a high degree of concern in these areas. But I'll just highlight the key points. And technology innovation, and from that discussion was cybersecurity continues to be an increasing challenge and a top level issue for local governments and governments at every level. Conversations were scrolling around AI governance and how to begin to use the tools and what were the frameworks of ethics and responsibility and reliability around integration of AI tools into local government. Broadband expansion, IT modernization were discussed. And again, federal funding, although remains available, counties are preparing for policy shifts. So the dollars in the pipeline, they expect to have them, but they are shifting and they are concerned about that. The area that I'll highlight for us most importantly, I think, from my takeaway was the potential actions for Anchorage. The third bullet down is essentially how do we use our technology folk to help develop a federal monitoring policy tracking system. So we're tracking the policy changes that impact the digital infrastructure and potentially other infrastructures. The idea is that there's so many areas of shifting federal priorities. How do we know and how do we keep track of them, especially in this area? Telecommunications and Technology Policy Steering Committee meeting. The key points in that area were broadband expansion and digital equity as they remain national priorities, but again, federal priorities and new executive directives create concern and shifts. The next area of the report is disaster preparedness and emergency response and housing. And I thought it was an interesting connection of housing. And just to put a finer point on this discussion, I had an opportunity to meet and sit with the Lahaina contingent, the folks from Maui, and hear them firsthand. And then also hear from, as obviously people were referencing what was happening in Los Angeles and in the different areas. And we did a short model demonstration of a scenario case study. And some of the counties didn't necessarily identify with the case study because the case study was based on wildfires because of Lahaina and California. Other communities were thinking of floods, for example. The North Carolina contingency was thinking of flood and the concern of FEMA response. So the idea behind the disaster response training and the key points were preemptive action is critical to mitigating disaster impacts. Many federal emergency relief programs remain in flux due to those federal shifting priorities. Housing shortages dramatically worsen disaster response challenges requiring new preemptive housing frameworks. Zoning reform and incentives must prioritize disaster resilient housing development. Potential actions for Anchorage in this area were implementing preemptive emergency mitigation policies, including zoning reform, infrastructure reinforcements, streamlined permitting for rapid post-disaster reconstruction. I will flag for my colleagues that as we had this discussion across the various tables, I highlighted our work around the temporary shelter space that we created in code to give opportunity for the pallet shelters and these temporary shelter opportunities. That was grabbed by other counties as one of the things they could think of preemptively to put into code. So right on, we worked on the pallet shelter stuff, and we did it in response to our needs. But communities that have different needs see strategies like that as a preemptive response to have in code or in the hopper, so that you're not deliberating what are the code responses if disaster happens. Establishing a housing disaster task force to develop policies ensuring Anchorage can rapidly house displaced residents after emergency, and thinking through some of these other areas. I will flip the page and turn to the next area so I can jump forward, recognizing my time. One of the conversations through that lens that emerged was this new housing model and how to flip the framework, thinking of the traditional housing development model being based on the shortages for current and projected needs. If I celebrate the mayor, for example, on 10,000 homes in 10 years, thinking through the traditional development strategy that is projecting toward meeting needs today and growing into a space. But sitting with the Lahaina contingent and thinking of the real concern of disaster, the question flips on its head and says, what if we lost 7,000 to 10,000 homes overnight because of a wildfire? How do we respond to that challenge? How fast would we move what barriers out of the way to concern? And I think there's a degree of luxury that we have taken for granted in this conversation from my vantage point, Chair, with respect to the urgency of concern that is exacerbated by our remoteness. So while other counties who are on lower 48 road systems share federal response concerns, our concern must be even greater because we're even that far removed. Moving further on, just wanted to flag that for areas. Look at this pre-permitted accessory dwelling units and modular housing that can be deployed rapidly in emergencies. So work that we're doing now is resilient work in many ways around making sure that we have housing. And so thanks to my colleagues for championing housing with such urgency, preemptively to the urgency of this particular framework. But I think it's important that we recognize some of these things, and obviously it's a national conversation. Continuing along community and economic development, I had a chance to listen to the Building Resilient Economies in Coal Communities Forum, because coal communities parallel extraction communities, and the shifting priorities of energy and workforce development were high priorities of that discussion. People were talking about those federal grants that were in the pipelines for transitioning people into even green economy jobs. What do those things mean, and how do we stay in front of the green workforce development that needs to happen while we have shifting federal priorities? One of the areas of the next one, which is near and dear to my heart, was leveraging the arts to promote community and economic development. As you know, our committee, the Community and Economic Development Committee, has focused on this, and this body has supported endeavors into building the economic framework for this sector for our city. Well, the key points were here were creative industries are critical economic drivers, but those federal funding, again, remains volatile. The idea here, coming from other places, is establishing the Anchorage Arts District or continuing supportive work around that with state and private investment. Chair, I'll flag for you, one of the interesting things about being around government long enough for my long timers is that you'd see iterative the iterative nature of policies and reports. And so I'll go back to a report that I remember during the Berkowitz administration that I think was funded prior, that came through, which was the Make Anchorage report. And it was really the idea of the creative economies, the museum and placemaking, but through this creative city lens. And I hope that that work, I think it was funded and sponsored by AEDC. I hope that they also bring that back so we can be keeping those conversations around. The next area of the report share was tribal and rural relations, National Association of County Leaders and Allies meeting. And the key points there were tribal funding and governance policies, again, shifting with those executive orders. Chair, as I listened to the discussion, it came to me, and I think I reached out to the chair while I was on the trip and congratulated the work that I think put us in this national conversation out in front, the government-to-government relations with the municipality of Anchorage and Eklutna. It was out there on the cutting edge of what people aspire across different counties in the country. So I take a lap. I wanted the chair to know that, and the members of this body who worked on that and who continue to have that commitment to know that that is really good work and it's cutting edge to the national scape. And I'll close with this part, Chair, and just essentially say, given the concerns of shifting federal priorities and federal fundings, the action plan that this recommends Anchorage take a very cautiously optimistic approach, considering local resiliency while actively monitoring federal changes and advocating for policy stability. And just a flag for my colleagues, the last page of this document was coming from all of those meetings that I sat in. Essentially, they developed a short-term, mid-term, and long-term checklist, and these were the checklists that I flagged for us through the national lens, not necessarily saying that they apply wholesale to us, but things like developing the federal policy monitoring system to track those executive orders so that we can centralize where that's happening and just be real clear about that. It probably is, and if it isn't, and other things along this that maybe we can take away back to our respective committees. And with that, Chair, I will step back away from my time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, George. And next, any questions? No. Next, then, a briefing on our trip to NLC. I don't think there's a written report. And I think last night, I don't see your name on the list here. That's kind of funny. Yeah, she's actually the NLC member. But that's okay. We did bring Meg and Felix on this adventure, but why don't you go ahead and dive us in? I know you did a brief discussion of it last night, but might as well go there again.
Yeah, I think, and this was at least the second kind of DC convening that I had been to with the group. I think probably a lot of similar discussions to what George had shared. Cities and counties have different functions, but are still local government. And so certainly a lot of concern about federal uncertainty. And I think comparing with last year, it was interesting because all the federal agencies were there saying, hey, we have this money we're trying to give away, right? And so the meetings were really like helping connect people with the technical assistance. And then this year it was kind of a big question mark, right? And I think there were federal agencies there. We didn't have specific business with them, so we didn't seek them out. But yeah, I think just a real air of uncertainty. And then I think yeah, definitely concerned about disasters. There was a lot of good talk. I was trying to think of all the different sessions there were ones on water quality. I mean, it strikes me that some issues are probably your experience too, George. They're far afield from us, right? Lead pipes from 200-year-old systems. But then there are areas where it's equivalent, whether it's wildfire danger or just infrastructure needs, period. And so yeah, I guess I've found it is interesting. We're both kind of outside of the realm of some of those things, or it's not our issue. And then also we're ahead of some things, or we're moving in parallel. So I think that's definitely a theme. And then I guess I'll also share, we heard from the Vice President, JD Vance, speaking about kind of speaking to cities about what their priorities were, and starting out with housing and zoning reform, which was interesting, and saying that that's in the area of local government, but then also switching to some of the rhetoric that we heard on the campaign about immigration, right? Or this assumption that the reason why folks can't find housing is because other people are competing for that housing. So I think that was an unfortunate kind of zero-sum game way to look at our country. But yeah, no, I think there's just a lot of uncertainty. It's hard to know what else to say about it. But it was a good trip. We had productive conversations with our delegation. I think a general theme is to what extent is Alaska different, or there's carve outs, or you kind of, you get on the lifeboat versus what happens to everybody else. I think that's really an open question that we're all struggling with. So I guess that's my very uplifting report to give. I can tell that. And so obviously because it's, federal, and this was true when Biden spoke last year, lots of security you have to go through. And so it was clear that they were, checking for weapons and all that stuff. But also we had just had a box launch that included apples. And so I think a lot of people probably just not with bad intent had put them in their pocket to eat later. And so there was a whole table of apples. It looked like a farmer's market, and they were taking away anything that you could basically, I think, throw. Yeah. So Felix had a water bottle, and he had like a disposable one, had to give it up. And so, yeah, there was definitely some preemptive kind of crowd control, I think. And there was a little bit of heckling in the meeting too. So no throwing, but some words were said, so on both sides.
And I heard it was pretty civil. I managed to do something else for that session, but that it was pretty civil until Mr. Vance started connecting immigrants to the solution to homeless. Getting rid of immigrants means we're going to have housing for everybody. That was not a well-received sentiment in a room full of people in the trenches on how do we solve this homeless crisis. And so until that point, I heard it was actually quite civil. And you can watch this whole speech on YouTube if you just Google it. So you can see his presentation to the National League of Cities. I only would offer parallel to what Ms. Brawley said, is that the theme of this year's conference, and I've been to 8 years of them, was uncertainty. And that is an awful feeling to be leaving with, what my experience with that adventure has been. It's been like going to group therapy for government officials first, and then leaving with joint kind of inspiration for how we're going to get through the next year. This year didn't have any of that. This year just left with the same question you had walking in, but even scarier, like, what's going on? Nobody knows. And this comes from right at the core of the government, where we were meeting with people we've been meeting with as an organization collectively for 65, 70 years. And so, that underscores just this message that we heard last night a little bit, and that we'll continue to hear, that no one is coming to save us, that it's our mission to be prepared to save ourselves. And that is the fundamental issue, that we have a duty to look out for the future and fate of our city and our neighbors. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll add on a positive note too. I think to that point, you get a real profound respect for all of the people doing this work everywhere else, right? Because we're all different, but people show up. It's not campaigning, it's not grandstanding. It's really people that, wherever they're coming from, they are working on these issues and really trying to do the right thing. So it was a really awesome. So I would definitely encourage folks to go to these conferences. The next one is in November. It's the big one where everybody comes, not just elected officials, and it's in Salt Lake City. So yeah, so weather notwithstanding, I think it'll be a good time.
And weather could be fun if you ski.
Yeah.
George.
Yeah, Chair, thank you for mentioning that. And I'll also flag that the level, not only is no one coming to save us, but when I walked away from the conference, I recognized that the level of competition across jurisdictions is going to be incredibly high. The idea of collaboration and alignment into potential solutioning was a little different in the spirit. People were thinking, how do I make sure I get what I need if I'm going to get an earmark from the different federal framework? And so I think that, and this really speaks to the clearer we can be with our priorities and our legislative priorities, the clearer we can be with what we're working toward. And I think it's going to really help us, because we're going to be campaigning even against or in the face of all the other jurisdictions now who are fighting for themselves.
So I would offer, I saw a different flavor at the NLC, that it was definitely technical assistance for how to be prepared. Everyone was still in that collaborative mode. it didn't feel like we're on the verge of some, scrum for limited resources. I think I heard people across the board talking about how they are preparing for the uncertainty, and some were, I mean, it spanned the gamut from people building their relationships with their conservative representatives to preparing bail funds for their constituencies. Like it was in order to, interrupt proceedings that might be happening in their jurisdictions for various causes. It was a very broad and interesting conversation on that account. Everyone's preparing differently, but everybody is preparing. All right, anything else on that? Any other questions? No. So this is a pretty light meeting we had today. Next, we have our round robin on pending business and updates from committees. So why don't we start? So
Sure. So I believe we may have an AO coming forward on nitrous oxide. So as whippets. Yeah. No, and this is in relation to teens getting their hands on whippets, whipping cream, nitrous oxide containers to inhale. So using it for unintended consequences. So thank you to be engaged for helping us out on that one. The other two that I won't get to that I would maybe throw out there is we did have a discussion a while back on power poles with Chugach Electric and their fund that they're pulling like 1% to put utilities underground. The problem is the other utilities are not getting the same funding, so it leaves as along Old Seward a pole where the top power line has been buried, and now you have cable and telecom below that, and they become the new owners of the pole and can't do it. So we're putting money aside but not getting the benefit. And then, yeah,
we
go
move
ahead.
on from that. Brandy, would you add that to my list of projects? Thank you.
The last one, I think it needs to sit and bake a little bit longer, but getting a lot more feedback around the red stripe, 100% ID check. And does that make sense at a sit-down restaurant like Sullivan's? I don't know how to craft that line. Maybe it goes to package stores. So that's why I would suggest letting that soak a little bit longer. We just implemented it. Let people get used to it. Maybe that noise goes away and the action is do nothing. And that's it. Thanks.
On that topic, I'll briefly add that there is a gray area that I've been kind of wrestling with upstairs with Eva a little bit. And that is for events at like hotels where there's wine on the table and you have, 500 people there for this or that charity event. Where does that fall? Because traditionally it's not an environment in which you have that kind of table service. And so there was a guidance that was resubmitted, a secondary guidance that just essentially said use common sense to the provider on certain things. And so, but it's still a gray area because there are a number of licenses that are different, but they all either kind of resolve around the package or retail consumption. And so it's an ongoing concern. And yes, a little marination is probably good. There's Brian.
Yeah, thanks. I don't have, I guess, specific projects at this point. I'll just say I'm still figuring out what I want to do with the rest of the year, and kind of where to focus energy there. I do want to come back to the housing action plan, and I think it's an orientation activity for new members to talk about the assembly work plan and the housing action plan. Felix and I will be doing that. But I just want to also flag, we haven't touched it really since 2023. We've gotten a lot of things done. Obviously, there's a lot more in there. But now the mayor has the 10,000 home strategy. So just kind of want to figure out what to do with that plan. So I just want to put that out there as something to think about, because there's different options that we have, but it would be a shame if we just let it go away. So that's a thought. I've also been, I mentioned last night, just not to relitigate that, but advocating with the mayor's office about fiscal future and really just how to engage the public directly in those conversations. Not that hasn't been happening, but I think just kind of backing up and really making it a two-way street so that more people understand even the basics of our budget or some of the challenges, because I think that's the basis from which we can get to whatever the solution is or the change. And I want people to feel more ownership. I don't want people to feel like the government's just doing things to them, right? And I think it's easy just to say, oh, well, they've got it figured out, I don't need to care, right? And I think we're not in that space. So anyway, that's just something, these are just thoughts to put out in the universe, but thinking about and happy to talk to others about it. On the subject of finance, and Meg said this last night, we need somebody for budget and finance, ideally bringing them in soon. It could be a brand new member, but unlike me, who was brand new and started as co-chair, no one that I know of is on the Budget Advisory Commission or has specific knowledge of the budget. So not to say that they aren't very smart, but it's hard to step into that on day one. So I'm looking at the few of us who will still be here for a little period of time and just think about even transitional. And then I will emphasize the work of that committee is not what it was in 2023. It is not writing the budget. And really, it's more just kind of making sure that we have folks who more thoroughly understand the big picture of the budget so that, it is one of our core functions. So anyway, just to put that out there, it's not the type of work that it was, but it is very important. And it is one of our core functions as the assembly. And then lastly, just a communications note, I've been bugging people about, as someone who didn't live here in 2009 and has not grown up around volcanoes, I had no idea what any of this is, right? Like the ash thing, why you have to cover your computers, all that stuff. So I've reached out to AFD and OEM and the mayor's office and folks just to ask, because I know they've been putting together communications, but saying I would like to also push those out through my newsletter and just making sure people know, because otherwise a whole bunch of computers are going to get fried and right? Like, so folks that like me that have moved from other places and don't have that lived experience, just making sure it gets out there. And I know there's effort to do that, but just to say, I think we already pushed out those communications to everybody, but just consider kind of amplifying those messages so more people see them. And I'm going to continue to do that with the little channel I have. So I think that's everything for now, but yeah, happy if others have ideas or want to work on something, I'm always open to talking. Thanks.
Zach. Yeah, nothing from me today. Karen.
Thanks. I was just going to dovetail on something Randy said. Whippets are different, but if you've ever tried to go and purchase gold or silver spray paint, they often don't spray. They, to get that out of the canister, there's more of the whatever people huff. And so that's another real problem is those spray paints, and you go through a store, those ones are often unpropellable because they've been huffed. So that's one thing I was going to say. As far as the alcohol, I would also say there is some settling to do, and I hope you'll give it a minute. I've responded to a few people that just say, oh, okay, I get it. And then there's some that are never going to say, okay. But I also feel like there might be some need for better messaging. Like I had I believe we said private parties were exempt. So perhaps what you're talking about should just be said that it was exempt. The other thing is I was told that a party, one person at the table didn't have ID, so they ordered a non-alcoholic drink and she was forced to leave the bar. So I think it's some better messaging perhaps needs to go out. And it looked like what the mayor's office sent out was good, but maybe just some clarifications as we start hearing these comments. And then, did you want to?
Or I was just gonna say, maybe as you're hearing some of these things, send them to us and we can summarize them and send them to the mayor's office. Or yeah, that's probably the most efficient way to do it. If you hear of examples for an FAQ, like you already did, we could continue to pass that on to the mayor's office.
That's a great idea. And then the last thing is next week that I'm doing the work session on the, okay. Yeah. Oh, wow, it's late. Next week, I'm going to be presenting at Bartlett Club at the Senior Center about the parental responsibility if dangerous weapons come to school, deadly weapons. And then we'll have the work session April 3rd and April. Why are you doing a little smile thing? That's not really in relation to, are you pulling the plug on me on that? Okay. Okay, I can't see it, sorry.
You have your right to introduce. They have been introduced, they exist, and they will be heard. And so that's
Okay.
where we are. And so
All
no,
right.
I'm just,
All right, sounds good.
no plugs are pulled. by
And,
me.
and April 8th, we will continue as long as it takes, I've been told.
The offer I made and asking for the time on that was that if there's a large crowd, we will have a special meeting. So I've already let folks know if the business doesn't get done on the 8th, that we will schedule a continued meeting. So that is in the mix. That and many other reasons. Mr. Littlefield, Mark.
Thanks. Just to echo Anna's comments. I'm leaving, of course, and I'm on the AMATS committee and Meg's on the AMATS committee. So we're down to one. Daniel's gonna be the Lone Ranger unless he gets a compadre to ride along with him. I'm also on the transportation committee with Daniel, so leaves a big void there. Not that I did a whole lot, but I tried. I do have some things coming up on April 8th. Couple things one thing that I brought forward and one that I co-chaired with Member Myers. And I think Anna was wanting to be on one of mine. I don't know if can we talk about it?
This
This is the time,
when
okay.
you can in
So-
fact talk about it.
Last year, I was approached by an individual that was a first responder, and he asked if we could propose something to where it's not so simple to get their address. So we started working with legal, and they come up with one that was for victims of sexual harassment and sexual abuse. They can come in and they can hide their identity with the municipality of Anchorage. You can't just type in a name and pull it up. Well, I was flabbergasted that it was actually there and that it didn't exist. So moving forward, and then what keyed this in is Claire said it to me about there's a state bill going forward to do this exact same thing that we're doing here in the municipality. So I'm working with the legislative staff over there and the legal. We've come forward with this, and hopefully we can get it passed to where we can make it optional for these individuals that are first responders that may be in a hazardous situation and would love to have this opportunity to protect their family and their friends. So we're moving forward with that. I hope it will be supported. And then the second one was we have an individual or a company out in Birchwood, and there's no control on any large scale livestock, horses, whatever you want to call. There is no code that says that we can control the disposal of waste. So we're moving forward with that, and hopefully we'll get a response with that. And other than that, that's all I got.
I will say that it was a column that I read that talked about that one as a really viable use of Title 21. That's like the purpose, those kind of awful industrial uses that sandwich up against residential neighborhoods. So
That's all I have. Thanks, Chair. Oop.
Cameron.
Well, 2 weeks from now, I'll have a little more head space, but following closely the sort of evolution of the ACE board work and the final completion of that board, and that board is going to engage in a strategic planning process coming soon, and so just following closely with that. Also, the naming commission that now we have more than one member on, and still looking for at the joint meeting with the Native Village of Eklutna. My hope is that there's an agenda item on there to talk about them recommending someone to serve on that. I think that Aaron might be willing to do it, but if not, someone else. So just following that close, and really in terms of getting that panel or that commission up and running and functioning effectively and all of that. So those are a couple of pieces. Really looking forward to the mayor's public safety plan that we've been waiting for quite some time in terms of what that's going to look like, and wanting to sort of continue to work on aligning our work on the assembly with the mayor's on that and through the committee. And probably the only other thing that I would say is that still continuing to work towards rebooting the Public Safety Commission and looking at a process to go through that. So those are just a few items. Thanks.
Anna?
Yeah, thanks. And we can talk about this offline too. On the subject of the naming commission, we had a constituent talk about KQFD Park in Bayshore, and they want to change it to Bayshore Park. So just to note, we should follow up on that, and that could be a good like little case study. And I did advise the person that the code includes the indigenous naming piece, and so that we should also make sure that that particular spot does not already have a name. But anyway, just for later. Thanks.
Ms. Martinez?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Quickly, continuing to work on transit supportive development corridors and the activation of the 2040 land use plan alignment with some of my colleagues and the administration. I'm beginning to work with and circle the wagons around a memo that I introduced to the Community Economic Development Committee around the hospitality sector, and beginning to put together some plans to host a conversation, a public forum at some point later on in the spring after the election. And also working on a resolution that members should expect for the first meeting in April around worker cooperatives. This is the 2025 is the year, international year of worker co-ops. And so we're bringing something forward on that, working with a member of our community from the university on that. And then lastly, Chair, I'm working on, and I've mentioned this before, a food security item around urban farming, urban gardening, food security, and permaculture, and some of the other important resiliency conversations that need to happen in that particular space. So thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks. There's two statements that Mr. Rivera Felix asked for me to read. The first one is related to committee scheduling. I think it would be helpful if we reviewed the committee schedule and discussed an informal branch policy to, as much as possible, hold all our committee meetings between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. Wednesdays and Thursdays. I appreciate there are two committees where this would change its culture completely, CEDC and AMATS. But besides those committees, most committees meet in the middle of the day. Based on my math, there are on average 12 hours of committee meetings a month, excluding AMATS. Those 12 hours could easily fit, I would hope, in the 24 hours available in the time slot of 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Wednesdays and Thursdays every month. This would really help folks on more strict hourly schedules and younger folks or folks with families interested in serving on this body. So yes, a selfish request, but one that could be helpful as we look at rebalancing the workload as a body going into the future and becoming more disciplined with our time. I would propose that any work sessions that need to be scheduled on Wednesdays or Thursdays would happen before or after these allotted times. The second is fiscal discussion. This is a very nascent idea, which came to me after the sales tax vote yesterday, but I am considering putting forward a first quarter budget request to fund the work needed to have a broader community conversation around the fiscal situation. This work is expansive. However you feel about the sales tax, the Project Anchorage Coalition invested $150,000 plus whatever staff time from primary partners. That funded research through UAA CED, 2 polls, and 2 consulting firms to help with the public and political processes up to the vote. Obviously, whatever work we funded would look different, but my understanding of the body's sentiment is that it wants to take a leadership role in having a conversation. The model of someone else having the conversation and bringing it to us at the back end isn't supported by the body. Being in that leadership role will take more resources than we have, in my opinion. I'll listen to the recording of this meeting, so please do trash this idea if you don't like it. I'd rather not invest time in an idea not supported by the body. If there is some interest from the body in this or a similar idea, I would be happy to have other thought partners in this work.
Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thank you. And this is for Felix to watch this later, I suppose, because he's not here, but just to say, I agree with both of those. And I've been trying to advocate, or I have been advocating to the mayor's office that we should make this a priority and not necessarily them leading or, whatever it is, but to make some resources for that and to start planning it now because it will take time. So I'm interested, I'll follow up with Felix directly, but just to say, yeah, I think this is necessary. And then whether or not it's the assembly leading or whatever it looks like, we need to make this happen. So I strongly support that. Thanks.
George.
Thank you, Chair. Because the request was made to put something on the record so it could be listened to after, I think the challenge for me should be the separation between the municipal conversation of revenue and its own ability to be self-resilient or more resilient rather, versus framing anything around the expenses of an outside group at all. So if folks want to work on that offline, I would recommend that. But if the other framework is being brought forward, yes, Chair, I just want to remind folks, you don't have to listen to yesterday to remember that I also mentioned we spent a lot of money and we spent a lot of resources into this process as well. And so I think it's a fair conversation for members that want to have, but I would just encourage to remove it from what existed and have a different conversation and don't build it on the bones of what happened in the Project Anchorage vote. Thank you.
Asked to question about the utilization of first quarter budget revisions. My take on that is that this will be a conversation in context with administrative priorities, school district priorities, and assembly priorities. And so I wouldn't say I would, as to use your term, trash it at this point, but I would say from where I sit, it is got to be in context as opposed to kind of this is our big champion cause. And so it could be for some, not for others. For me, in context is pretty important. Mr. Cameron.
Mr. Cameron. Yeah, it's a good forum to have this conversation. I think we should utilize this space because, the advantage of putting some money towards something helps us to have some structure and some process. And so I think that's not a bad idea. I think that that finding forums where it's not three people in a room with others, it's just such a, Open Meetings Act is a very important thing, but boy, it makes this work really, really hard. And so I do think a tremendous amount of work was done both by the assembly and then the community. And I think there's a lot of really good stuff there that we need to build on. And I'd really like to be part of that. But I think there needs to be a framework and a process discovered or developed in terms of how to do it. And I have my own ideas about what that might look like, and I'm sure others do as well. But I think there's enough people in this room and out there that want to continue the work and think that there's something that we can develop that's possible and build off what was done. So I think that's great, and I appreciate Felix bringing that idea forward and would like to be part of that. And I would also just say that I just have this great memory of Jason Bockenstedt going out into the community and giving a sort of an update to the community on the sort of financial history of the city and how we got to where we are. And I remember one of those sessions at the Lusac Library, and it was really well attended. And it just was a really sort of nonpartisan, it felt very matter of fact in terms of just the numbers. Like, how do we get to where we are? And how do we pay for the things that we all think we need, like police and fire and roads and infrastructure, all these kinds of things. And so I feel like that there's something around that about creating a better campaign around the realities that we face as a city and how we're in this together and how we want to pay for that. So I look forward to that conversation, and I appreciate Felix's comments. Thanks.
So I have a brief list to produce here. One, doing the initial investigation on incorporating Anchorage into the Z-Tag program for cars, registrations, permanent registration. We opted out some years ago. I think there is some slight tax revenue that is generated from the registration process. And so there will be some economic effect, but that's kind of coming forward. I don't know the timeline. I'm still waiting to see a draft traffic camera policy from the traffic department. They have it in their hands to draft, but we're almost to the point where there are traffic cameras at every intersection in this town. There will be within a short order of time. And yet there's no policy on the access and use of that footage. And so I have heard some pretty scandalous stories of administrations past using the cameras for very interesting reasons and kind of gaining access and having unauthorized people in there. And then who knows what happens to the records. So I want to see some structure around that surveillance system that is now broadly being deployed across our city. And not to say I want it limited to not be useful, but I want to make sure there's a policy and that we understand the policy. And then, as Mr. Barrett didn't mention it in his brief report, but I'll note that there is an ongoing conversation about moving forward with the ranked choice voting conversation for the municipality. I'd hoped to introduce something before the transition, but alas, time continues to fly. And you will see very soon a public records update proposal to the body coming. It's in, I wouldn't say final draft form, but it's getting pretty close. The administration now has it. Ms. Altel and I have been working on it for over a year, and it's a first real significant update to the public records laws since about 1977. There have been modifications to it, but there hasn't been an overarching review. And the purpose of the project is to simplify the process, to provide better protections, and to make sure that the threat of fees doesn't stop people from receiving records that they should probably have access to. And so I can't say exactly when it's going to get in. The desire, obviously, by Ms. Alto, who's been working on it for a year, and I share, is to have it introduced by the 8th and then take it up before the certification on the 22nd. But I also share the core value of allowing the administration to have ample time to review it and provide their input. And so there are two competing interests there in terms of timing. So we'll see what happens, but it is significantly far enough that it is coming your way soon. And I think that that's the gist of my list. I did ask Brandy, just so Dean and Matthew knows, that she has been keeping these great little rosters of our projects. And so that are running through the legal department. And I know the Hive system is kind of coming together and it's getting to the point. And I think because we do these briefings, I'm going to ask that we figure out a strategy to generally get those updates monthly to the members before this meeting so that members can actually have their list of things and refresh themselves and be prepared to discuss the items on their list that they're willing to play at this meeting, right? It's kind of a little self-poker decision-making process. And so, but it dawned on me because I've asked now 2 months in a row, hey, what's on my list that we might come up with a system where the feedback happens just before this opportunity to speak. So otherwise, I appreciate Mr. Rivera's feedback on committees. I am planning, and we'll see what happens after the election, of course, to do a work session. I call it kind of a liaison speed dating, where we're going to bring in all the different organizations that want liaisons from the assembly. And instead of assigning, I'm going to provide them an opportunity to sell to the group why it would be great to participate, and then have members right there say, this is the one I want. And then that way it stops being like this chase of who's the right fit for this, who doesn't want it, who has time. Let them come in and tell us. And if there's a match, great. And so that's a kind of a thing that I'm working on. So members have a better opportunity to know what they're getting into, even when the opportunity should arise. So otherwise, that's my list. Anything else? Go ahead.
Yeah, on that topic with the liaisons, so, because I know, for example, Alaska Municipal League, you know, we have a designated board seat, just as an example. For these other ones where there's board seats, is that something that, I'm just curious, like, is that something we decided, or is it more the organization in the past has said? I mean, it's probably both, but.
I don't know that there's anybody here who's been here long enough to tell you how it started. Probably I could ask Dick Trainey because he was here for 1,000 years and he would probably have a sense. But the practical matter is it's hard to say. And NLC, we're not going to have someone come in, obviously. And AML, it's pretty straightforward. We don't need them to come in, but it's more like the Chamber, AEDC, ACDA, Visit Anchorage, you know, all of these organizations. And we've had some get a little spicy in their emails about members need to tell us when they're going to be here or not. And that's not how this works. And so, you know, come convince us why we should be involved. Our time is taxed. You know, our time is really taxed. And so anyhow, we're going to shift the burden on them to compel us with their motivating speeches and talks and who wants to be where. Just going to change the floor. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, and I meant not so much like how it started, but more kind of like, is that being driven in their like board bylaws, or is there a requirement for us to do, right? Because I think, for example, if they want 2 members and then we can only find somebody like 1, then it's a conversation of like, well, maybe the assumption that you're gonna, I don't know the answer to that. I'm just wondering.
I haven't actually investigated our code to see which liaisons might be in the code. Dean, maybe you could help us with that. I don't think there are that many, if any at all. AML might be there, but other than that, I don't know. I don't think there is. And so their bylaws, it doesn't really matter, right? It's
Yeah, yeah.
our commitment, their persuasion, and then your applied time. That's really, this equation comes down to how much time. Mr. Rivera's kind of commentary really gets to the heart of the matter for a lot of us. Like, there is only so much time in the day, and trying to protect everybody's interests on that account. Okay, anything else? Anyone else? Look at the order.
Just that, that consistency of blocking time every single month, and knowing it's gonna be that every single month, is just pretty much the most important thing. And then I don't know if we've gone back to, sorry. If we've gone back to the, in terms of the work sessions, I guess I'm not about clocking it, but is it always on the same, remember we had, it was this day and then up to this day and that time and then
Yep.
the next day, that sort of thing.
So,
But maybe just reminding us of what the formula is for that.
and I can speak to
would be
that
good.
just briefly now, but who knows, coming up, there might be changes coming for specific reasons, but Fridays are our day designated for work sessions. And it's 11, 12, 1, and then 10, and then 2 is the ideal situation, right? So we kind of try to keep it towards that middle day on Friday. Occasionally, there is the need for a work session that has to happen because a meeting is coming, someone's requested it, and there's no other time. We also reserve at least one Friday a month as a no meeting Friday, which isn't easy to block because it's kind of one of those fungible assets that moves over time. And then work sessions tend to be, work sessions in the alternative, if we can't get them on Friday, we'll move to Thursday first. And very, very rarely it's Wednesday. And I think once we did one on a Monday. And so, but practically speaking, the goal is to utilize Fridays. Now, Felix's argument, and it's rational, is to consolidate the committee meeting times into a tighter margin, but that may or may not work for some committees. And ultimately, the chair is the force that decides, at least under my kind of order. I don't want to tell the chair, you must do this then. That's the whole point of being the chair. And so therein lies a little bit of tension on the question of maybe certain committees don't, and then he would just won't participate on those committees, or those who can't. And so, but that's the conversation Felix wanted to spark. And I don't want to make any conclusions today, just put the question out there. But so to simply answer your question that you asked without all of that extrapolation is Fridays for work sessions, middle of the day, and expanding out from there. And then if we must, Thursdays to Wednesdays. Thanks. Karen?
I'm leaving, of course, so this won't affect me. But one comment I have about schedule is, I know you said Fridays could be kind of fluid, that no meetings Friday, but I really relied on, there's a no meeting Friday coming, I'm going to the cabin.
Yep.
And then boom, there's something on there and it's like, shit.
Yeah, I know. It's hard. We do our best. I have been religious about protecting them, but like this month, we had to change one because there's a bunch of critical items that had to be heard by a certain date. And there weren't a bunch of critical items on the unscheduled Friday. Like there's actually nothing on it. And so we do our best to be as regular and consistent as possible. That one's tricky. Because when you have critical items and everyone sees an empty page on the calendar, they're like,
Another thing that could be helpful to new people coming in is I really tried to do my vacation time when it looked like there was nothing coming.
Right.
And if a lot of people are traveling to, say, DC, maybe somehow broadly make it aware there's probably gonna be less meetings this week because we're traveling. So I would travel that week instead of the
Right.
week I chose.
And what we ended up doing this year, just because of timing, it was spring break. It was rather interesting. So it was a natural week for us to not have meetings, but yes, Rick, I heard. Other matters? Anyone else? Okay, we are adjourned. Have the rest of your day back.
Where are you going? You going somewhere fun?